Hi, thank you for your patience. My name is MJ Adams. I'm the Director of Community and Economic Development for the city of Greenfield. Sorry. And I'm here tonight with the team, a part of the team from Greenfield that includes Danny Letourneau, who's Chief of Staff, and Christian LaPlante, who's my grant program assistant. And Alan Torog is not here this evening, but he's the DPW staffer that is on the team. And to give you a little background, the city, when we started talking about making changes on our main street about a year and a half ago, realized that parking flared up pretty quickly as a conversation that people wanted to have us consider as we were taking a look at the plans here. And so we were able to receive funding from the Massachusetts Downtown Initiative, who provided us with the consultants from Stantec. They're a firm that does a lot of parking work with a number of municipalities. And they are here tonight, and they will introduce themselves, but I can tell you this: Jason, Perry, and Ethan. Okay. And this is the first time I've ever seen them live.
Is that right?
Yeah, we've always been on Zoom. Haven't we? Oh, okay. Zoom, in person. When you have a lot of meetings, you get confused about it sometimes. Anyways, they're here tonight to give you some background on what we know and how we're going to approach and get information about what our parking situation is, because as you know, like I said, there's a lot of stuff happening on Main Street. We have the libraries under construction. We have the fire station at the other end of Main Street that's under construction. The skateboard park is under construction. We know what's going to happen with Wilson's, with the redevelopment with the co-op and some additional housing on the site. And there's a couple of other things that are still in play. At the same time, we're doing an update of our downtown revitalization plan. We met here on January 19th and had a big discussion about that. I want to encourage you, if you haven't had the opportunity to take the survey about downtown, you can link to the QR code that's on these boards over here, or you can go onto the Community and Economic Development website, and there's a link to the survey there. And we strongly encourage you to share your input and insights and wisdom about what you think about our downtown. So as we move forward in the downtown revitalization plan update, that we can have good current data about what local people feel about our downtown. Yes, George?
I just wanted to mention how long the survey is active.
Yep, the survey will be open until February 5th, the evening of February 5th. And so thanks for reminding me to say that, George. So there's the downtown update, downtown revitalization update survey. And then tonight we're going to very specifically be talking about parking. And as soon as the consultants tell me they're good to go, I'm ready to hand it over to them. So here you go.
Thank you, MJ. My apologies that we were late, obviously on a totally different clock. So I don't want to talk for long. Actually, our objective here today is to hear mostly from you. This is going to be, as MJ said, an ongoing process. So our hope is to hear from you today, hear from you again in the future, provide other opportunities for feedback. We're just at the beginning of trying to understand things here. I have a way to advance slides, I'm sure, somewhere. Oh, that's cool. Oh, excellent. Okay, I like that. Okay, you can leave it right here for the moment. Briefly, I just wanted to say one thing that's important is that this technical services grant is basically free money to the city that was awarded because of a compelling narrative and argument to the state's Department of Housing and Community Development, mostly I assume through MJ and her team. So it's helpful that you have city staff who are kind of working to address issues and obtain this kind of assistance. And what that means is we're giving you this work more or less on the state's grant dollar, not local dollar. We are committed to bringing you sort of like the best practice and best approaches to how to deal with parking in a downtown. And it really gives you an opportunity to really test us and test new ideas and try to address what you think are the most critical things in town as best as possible. I'm going to really briefly just go through what we're supposed to be doing, focus on what we understand the goals of what our work is here, and we really want to have an opportunity for you to feedback, and we've got some of our goals on one of these boards, and tell us whether we got that right. Look at what our study area is, but most particularly, we want to hear from you about what works and what doesn't work. So we're going to put a couple of these maps on tables, have an opportunity after I'm done talking for you to actually come up here and tell us what works and what doesn't work, what we should be focusing on, because we're still at the beginning stages of pulling together information. Go ahead. So briefly, as I said, this is MJ's team listed on the left here. Again, that grant from DHCD is a great opportunity, and there's others in the future that she might be able to compete for. We have a number of people who are working on this project, but as she already introduced, Ethan and Perry are with me here tonight. I've been doing parking studies through the DHCD program for almost 2 decades. I've been a planner in transportation for 3 decades. And for some reason, we like parking, and we like to help out communities to understand that. So this is a list of the goals as we understand why we're here. They're supposed to be high level, but they're particularly targeted around things that we've understood, that have been written, that have been discussed with staff, that were in that application for grant funding. They're goals that we want to carry through the project. So whenever we see a problem, we want it to tie back to these goals. So they're pretty important. They're things that at the end of the project we'll come back to. I'm not going to read every word, but obviously we're here to understand what's on the ground. And that seems to be a very critical thing for folks because there's a lot of concern about pressure with future development, with changes potentially to Main Street, other recent upgrades that have been happening in city infrastructure. You're going to maybe get a new firehouse, the library addition. How does that impact parking? You got a new garage a few years ago. Is that helping you or not? And all that is being managed, and we want to critique how that's being managed and make it work better, not just for the people in the room, which are, I hope, mostly residents. Are we all residents in Greenfield? Put up your hands. Yes? Okay. There's also employees who come in from out of town. There's going to be students and commuters. And in particular, as we know, in the summer, there's visitors. So things get a lot busier, and we're going to actually count cars parked on the street later in the spring when we have a busy kind of a weekday or weekend to see how many cars are actually parked on the ground. But also we know that we got to communicate and be better about where parking may be available. Even when you just look at an aerial from any time over the past several years, you'll see lots of cars parked on Main Street, but you'll see fewer cars parked on the side streets and the lots, only a 30, 60-second walk away. And oftentimes, if we can get visitors from out of town to see that and to know that and be comfortable going there, that can help free up a lot of the front door spaces for the quicker turnaround that oftentimes you want to have there. But there's also going to be opportunities to fix some inefficiencies. Some of those lots don't get full because maybe a landowner doesn't want it to be full, or we've got some parking reserved. Or sometimes we even look at places where, a couple of lots that are sort of half empty are right next to each other. Can they be interconnected? Those are things that make a downtown work more efficiently, and they're things that we'll be trying to pay attention to. And lastly, the requirements for parking in code in a city like Greenfield are sometimes not actually attached to what's happening on the ground. They were written many years ago. We know that maybe at a time there was a perception that we needed to create parking. Well, now, if you look at an aerial of Greenfield, there's actually a lot of parking. We may need to revisit those standards and think about ways of encouraging people to share what they have more than just building more parking, which is not the nicest thing to look at. We'll figure out whether we need that much parking through this study, and that's our primary goal. So just briefly, here we are. We did a kickoff that determined what our scope is in January, and then we're getting into an opportunity to really look at things, but first we're talking with you, and that's what that STAR is about. We want to come back again towards the end of the project in June with what we think we heard from all of you tonight, what we analyze over the course of the subsequent tasks. We're assessing the data that's out there, looking at how it's used in its activity and developing strategies. We'll come back and say, did we get it right? We'll share with you, this is where cars are actually parked. This is where the pressures in your system are, and here's what we think you might be able to do to help alleviate that. So again, the study area, it's mostly that Main Street corridor, east-west. We are extending it a little bit north and south of there, just to get a couple of blocks along the kind of ladder streets connecting across there, encompassing obviously things like the City Hall, and of course the Wilson's building, which has a development plan in place. But we're also trying to catch up towards the CVS up on the Pleasant Street lot and also down Hope Street, just sort of understand dynamics. And this is all sort of the public parking area outside of this geography. It's mostly residential parking, and outsiders don't really park there, even necessarily know them. And we're counting some areas that are into the neighborhoods a little bit just to sort of see if there is spillover parking or not. But the other thing we look at is all public and private parking. We're really trying to understand this because we all think about, hey, you built the garage, that's a great opportunity for folks to park in, is that working right? But the truth is that lots of people will come to a customer parking space that says just for this restaurant, or even an employee just for this business, but then they'll go somewhere else. They'll go for a walk to, get food, or go to lunch, or maybe pay their taxes, or do something else in town, and they left their car where they originally parked it. Well, that's actually why we count private spaces, because that private space is actually doing a public function. And that's very common, especially in customer parking in a downtown. So we need to understand the whole system, not what is just, quote, city-owned. Really briefly, these are all those tasks. I'm going to blow through this and just simply say, leave it to us to kind of give you a thorough picture of everything that's happening on the ground through our assessment. We analyze it. We'll collect really good data and be able to slice it and dice it and understand what that means. We're actually getting a lot of great data from the city, too. That's what I mostly want to talk about. So there's a lot of really good information from the city. We're still going to have to go out and count cars on the ground later this spring, but we know through the Passport parking app and operations with the meters, as well as, of course, the garage, we have the sense of where activity is already. There's aerials that we can look at, but we know in the evening when there are not planes flying over taking pictures, that's oftentimes when things get really busy, which is why we still want to count cars, because it's in the evening during dinner time when there's a lot of pressure from visitors and for good entertainment, and at those periods of time, the meters are actually off. So we're not getting good meter data there, but there's maybe some ticket writing we can use. There's obviously permit systems here and other development plans that we've been provided, so we are beginning to read that and understand obviously what might be happening with the Wilson's development, for instance, the fire station reconstruction and the library, as I mentioned earlier. We take as much information as we can to create figures like this. So hopefully when we come back in June, and maybe even if we have a pre-release of some of that information along the way, our goal is that you kind of understand how much is being used and when. Like there's a bar chart here on the left that shows how many parking spaces are being used in this downtown. This one is Attleboro. And they have a few thousand parking spaces, but across the hours of the day, we want to understand how it works. In Attleboro, you see the bar chart start to go down over time. So that's a downtown showing there's more parking capacity in the evening. But also, where is that parking capacity? So we'll also map it, which is shown on the right, and those are heat map, more or less. Where it's green, things are good, active, not dead, but not too full. But when it gets to orange, it can be really too busy. Blue shades are when there's not as much activity. Those are the types of tools that we use to start to say, hey, this is an area that truly is under a lot of pressure or not. And we want to be able to share that with you and make it as visual and easy to understand as possible. We also will take all this stuff and sort of try to dissect what you do. So once we know what's happening on the ground, and we'll have collected a lot of information about what you do to regulate parking, we'll be saying, well, maybe enforcement should operate at different times, or maybe they should be more focused over here. Maybe the pricing is wrong. Maybe it's too expensive here, or it's not expensive enough there. Or maybe the time limits are wrong. Maybe people want to stay longer than the time limits are saying, and we should manage availability through price more than we should through the ticket that says you've stayed too long, get out of town after a 2-hour time limit. Those are all the kinds of things that we want to investigate. We'll investigate whether you actually need more parking supply. We know that in many communities, there's an opportunity to share what's already there in the private sector and be a little bit smarter about existing resources to be more efficient to one of those study goals. But many communities don't feel like they can unlock private parking and they need to construct more. We'll often work with the community to just figure out how you can add a few on-street spaces in a very busy area. So those are all things that we'll be trying to take a look at as we go. We also know, and this is an important parallel thing that's going on, is the Main Street Improvement Program has got lots of great ideas to it. And one of the best ideas is improving walkability, connectivity along what is a great, historic New England street. And a big part of that is going to be rationalizing what is a lot of pavement to get across, particularly with the angled parking. And so one of the proposals is to say, hey, we should maybe make this parallel parking. That will remove some of our front door parking. What does that mean from a parking perspective on a downtown wide basis? We already know you've got hundreds, probably thousands of parking spaces within that 1-minute walk off of Main Street. So if we lose some parking on Main Street, how much can that surrounding area pick up the slack? And if it needs to pick up the slack, what do we need to do to let people, as I said earlier, know that there's parking out back? And that's an important part. And so as we get into our data, we'll hopefully be informing that process as much as possible to be able to really maximize the opportunity that reconstructing a Main Street is something that's a lot safer, more walkable, more inviting can possibly be. And of course, I already mentioned the Wilson's building, the library, and the fire station. We know there's been other things that have been happening and proposed in this study area, the skateboard park, the First National Bank reuse, and of course the Court Square redevelopment. I think all of these things, some of these things are impacting supply a little bit, not necessarily are they increasing demand for parking, but certainly a development like the Wilson's building is trying to accommodate some of its demand on site, but we will actually be able to kind of model this and sort of say, hey, based on other buildings like this will have X number of cars. And is that enough parking or not? And that's part of what we try to do, is really rationalize expectations around future developments. All this goes into our consideration for this work as well. Go ahead. And with that, that's sort of like the summary of what we do. There's probably a lot more nuance and other details that we do along the way. But ultimately, the best thing that we can possibly do is interpret what we hear as good as possible. It's not to anybody's benefit if you really feel like you need to change how parking is done, if you really had the political motivation to go out and chase a competitive grant, if you really know that parking is a consideration for your Main Street improvement project, it's not worth figuring out a solution for parking or for anything else in a back room. It's all about figuring out something that'll actually work with the community, something that'll actually be meaningful and solve problems that are real and solve problems that we hear about. And so tonight is our first opportunity to begin engaging with more than just city staff, to start hearing about what needs to be fixed, what kind of things we need to do. So there's a few things we want to do with you this evening. And as soon as I end, I really encourage you to all come up front and we can push a table or two out. Why don't we put a second map out on a second table too? Is that a sign-in sheet? Is that what that is? Yes, so we have a sign-in sheet. We'll make this like, come to the front. We'll have a sign-in sheet. There's a couple of these maps on the tables. What we're trying to do, we got sticky notes, we got markers. We're trying to literally document what you say, what works or doesn't work. Like, I can never find parking here, or these meters are always broken, or this parking lot I love to go to. Like, I want to know about what seems to work and what doesn't work. And we want to be able to write that down as much as possible. I want you to share that with us. I want you to talk with us about what those are. But our goal is to get it on the paper as much as possible, because that's really how this then lives and goes to the next step. That's our data from your feedback tonight. I think that's our last slide, yeah. So I'll take any really fast questions, but then I'd love you guys to all come up front, because you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, one broad observation, you talked about the Main Street Improvement project. You mentioned improving it for pedestrians. I just wanted to mention that we have a complete streets policy, and you didn't mention cycling.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you should, yeah. I don't know enough of the details of the Main Street improvement, but by all means, I mean, there's transit down here too. We really, I always think about it from a pedestrian perspective, because when I talk about parking, people kind of forget this. Like, the parking on the other side of the street requires a crosswalk if you're going to come back. Like, that's really important. So the more of those, the safer there are, the better. But bicycle parking is absolutely something that we will be looking at. From my initial observations, it's lacking. Obviously, you want more on Main Street, but there might be just an opportunity to be adding it elsewhere. I know new developments will have some of that. Cycling is a big thing in the Pioneer Valley. It's too recreational right now. It really should be something that everybody does at all times. So I think it's a great opportunity with Main Street to bring that into downtown for sure. Sir, yeah.
Can we get bike?
I don't know, maybe. That would be great. I mean, I can't speak to that design specifically, but maybe. I know we're dealing with downtown Hyannis right now, and it's interesting because they maybe could have, but they probably would have had to take out a lane of parking. But what we were able to do was create really good bicycling facilities on parallel roads and made Main Street in Hyannis really slow so that the bikes can actually just take the lane. That, I don't think you have the opportunity for parallel routes here as much, so it's something to think about, I'm sure. But
Can I add a little more detail?
yeah, please, MJ, yeah.
So tonight, we're talking about parking, but we're talking about parking tonight because on February 9th, in this very same room, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., we're going to be having the first workshop around the Main Street Improvement Program that will be talking about bike lanes and reconfiguring Main Street. And I absolutely invite you back to participate in that. But I'll share with you that we wanted to do the parking workshop first so that the community was well aware that we knew that whatever we were doing on Main Street was going to have parking implications. And we wanted you to be aware that we're on it, that we are thinking deeply about the parking impacts that will happen as we're taking a look at the Main Street program. But the bikeway, the bike lanes, and the roadway reconfiguration, that is all, you're all welcome to come and have that conversation with us on February 9th from 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. right here. Okay?
Not at 5:30,
No,
as I've learned. Right here in the front and then to the back, yeah.
Some years ago, and I don't remember the year, the courthouse was moved to the corporate center on Munson Street.
Okay.
And at that time, they said that somebody, and I don't know who, would need parking, so they put up all these, I don't know what they're called, these reserved parkings for certain people. And at that time, I came downtown a lot. I'm about only a half a mile away, but I don't walk that much. Anyway, I could never find a place to park. And I go to Second Congregational Church, and they put either handicap or electric car thing, charger place. And there's no place for anybody to park behind City Hall unless you have a permit. And if you take away parking on Main Street, we're going to be killed because they moved the courthouse back and they didn't give us one slot of parking. I know some of those slots are given to people who own stores or run their business. But I remember times I stopped coming because I couldn't park. It was in the parking lots, it was on the streets, on the side streets, not Main Street, but on side streets. Every slot, I wanted to visit my daughter when she was house sitting someplace, I couldn't find a place to park.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's basically why we're here, because we've heard that, definitely heard that from customers even who aren't residents who come in and can be frustrated. I mean, part of our goal is to be able to say, are those reserved spaces here? Should they be here or should they be somewhere else? Can we open up other opportunities for that?
Courthouse moved back, and they gave us not one parking
Right.
spot back.
Right. So that's great to hear. That's very good to hear. Thank you. I wanted you in the back before. That part I can't comment on. Go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You're going to be doing your traffic study in the spring. Are you going to do that during April vacation? Because the traffic pattern changes dramatically
No,
with schools in
absolutely
session.
not. So we will
and
be
schools not.
counting cars, parked cars, definitely on a very average but as busy as possible spring day. We're not going to do it after school is out, so we're going to do it in the late spring. We're not going to do it obviously during April vacation. I think it's a little bit too cold here. So we're thinking mid-May is about the right time.
I would encourage you, and maybe you have some numbers from other places. Our traffic pattern changes when school's not in session,
Right.
Because all those kids now can come to the downtown and do activities. So there's more traffic during that period of time.
Do you think there's more parking?
Yes, there's more people parking.
Okay. So maybe we should do it in the summer instead of the spring.
I would encourage you to do it in the summer. I think that would be a
what we
better
can
time.
do is we have access to a database of how people drive into any community in America. And we use that as a proxy for parking activity. So we can quickly take a look at what is the high season in Greenfield. Similarly, we have a lot of great data on when they actually pay more at the meters, which is another way of saying. So we'll take a look at that and make sure whether it's May or maybe it's better to be June. Our only concern with June or even later is, great, the kids are out of school. That oftentimes means they're out entirely, which is true of college students. So that's oftentimes a time not to count because demand actually drops. But we will get it right before we do anything, that's for sure. In the front here.
Yeah, I can name 3 places where I've tried to park.
Yeah.
And today I tried to go to the food pantry. No place back there. Truck was unloading. I finally gave up. And I don't like paying for a meter, and I need my car and I need my free food. I hardly ever go there, but today I thought, oh, I've got time, why don't I go? Zilch, like row after row after row was filled up with cars.
Are those free spaces?
Yes.
And the food
They
bank's a
have
popular
been. There's
destination.
one business there, there's the food co-op, that was the great big truck, and that wasn't the problem. But I've never gone there where I can't find a parking place. Otherwise, I guess I could have parked at, I don't know, it used to be American Legion. What's that thing back there now? It's
That I don't know.
renamed.
That I don't know.
Patriot.
The
Patriot Care.
Care. Okay, way out there, which is doable if I could actually get in there, get my food, and haul my big things way back there, because you come out with a cart of stuff, and I hardly ever get there. But today I was pretty annoyed by that. I've also tried to find the triad people, and that's the sheriff's department. I go through some parking lot, over here, over there, find out it's a locked building. There's a lot of parking lots where you can't get from that parking lot to this parking
Right,
lot.
right.
And I assume you know that.
Yep.
So, I don't frequently go to the Moose Club, but if they have an activity, don't ask me where the heck all those
Right,
people park, because my friend works at the Moose and uses the Moose. I haven't been there since somebody had a funeral. There's a lot of one-way streets, okay? You can't turn here, then turn here. Oh, you can't turn here and you can't turn here. Those drive me nuts. So I'm hoping you'll look at that.
Yep.
Behind the old, empty now Greenfield Community College, they've got a lot there. I used to go in there. I used to
Right.
teach there, as a
Right,
matter of
right,
fact.
What's
Can
that
you
gonna
park
be? Yeah.
there, or you're not allowed to park? It used to be there. They're not using it. And so that's a great big, no, it's not a huge parking lot, but it's parking that's not meters. So I'm forgetting, I guess that's mostly what I want to say.
Yeah, what you're saying is, I think, a common experience, and we see it as coming in from the outside. There is actually a lot of surface parking, particularly on the north side of Main Street, but how and what it is and how to circulate. So that's part of what we're trying to unpack and suggest some basic strategies on making that cleaner, clearer. Oftentimes, it is negotiation with private property owners, but as it turns out, we will likely find a precedent where there's some sort of sharing already happening in Greenfield. It happens everywhere we go. And the idea that a private parking lot can't function as a public facility is wrong, but there's a lot of misperception, and there's a lot of people who fear. Yeah, and so we need to work in ways that can unpack that and make the system work more efficiently. I don't want to take a couple, I want you, so here's the thing, you guys keep asking me questions, but I need you up here to give me specific comments later too, so I'll go a little bit longer. Ma'am, over here.
This is a question that's not about a specific parking area,
Yeah.
but much more about a question about how you change attitudes. There's a very suburban attitude in this town, which means that if the parking space is not in front of where I want to go, then I'm not going to go there.
Yep.
I lived in Boston a long time. I walked a lot. And so I'm wondering about whether your study is going to change for those folks who can walk. I understand that some people can't, but for those folks who can walk, changing that attitude.
You just hit the nail on the head, because that's really what good parking reform is about, is recognizing that we're not all the same, and that we all have different thresholds for what we are willing to do. If you're going to see Hamilton at the Wing in downtown Boston, somebody will pay $40 to park in the garage right next door. Somebody else will just spend an hour hunting for an on-street space that might cost them $4. And then somebody else is like, I'm just going to go to the common garage because I know it's only, $15, and I'll have the nice walk across the common. You need to have the ability to accommodate all those different levels of interest and more or less temperature. They like to call it the Goldilocks principle. I'm okay with this, but I don't want to go that far. I want to be able to just, and so we need some front door spaces for some people who absolutely need it, but we need to find the right tools to incentivize others to go further. And sometimes it's just making the walk better. I don't need to necessarily have lots of signs or charge very high at a meter to push people away. In fact, they still won't want to be pushed away if the walk isn't comfortable. But if the walk is nice, it's well lit, it's obvious, heck yeah, because that's part of my experience in Greenfield. We want more of that. You don't want just Main Street improved. You want to see the whole thing improved. I mean, obviously, we're not going to do a major infrastructure project, but we'll start to see those things over time come into play, and hopefully some of them are sooner than later. Go ahead, and then you, ma'am, sorry.
About this in terms of what costs money and what doesn't. I have to say, I moved from Chicago and was really, really frustrated when pay for park started creeping up my block and infringing on my, I think I heard you use the word surface parking. I'm thinking about free street parking. I don't know if that's private or public. I'm sorry, that's really hard. But how, do we need an attitude change where we're just going to assume when everybody's thought this through and organized their plan that you're going to find meters everywhere and those free on the street parking, which may be 3 or 4 blocks away from where you're going, but I still search for those.
And you should, because you're that perfect temperature of person that is in every system. And we want to be able to make a balanced system. Like, this is one of the failings of many places, including Chicago. The only thing Chicago did right was it's more expensive in the loop, but less outside of the loop. But then they didn't tear it down into the neighborhoods. They didn't have different flavors, more or less, for those different people. So it's really just 2 prices. And that's even a problem in Boston, where they haven't really figured out how to do that. But there's lots of cities who've done that. And there's many small communities, even in the Commonwealth, who've listened to these lessons and done just that and said, all right, Main Street may need to be $1 an hour because it's got so much demand, but that means the side streets should be like 50 cents, and you go 2 blocks away, it should be free. And you've got meters 2 blocks away. Maybe you shouldn't. Maybe we need to be thinking about how that system works collectively, reward the people who are willing to walk a little bit further. Yes, a space that's in high demand, it's basic economics. That's going to be one that's a higher price. It's very hard to implement a strategy that's going to work for everybody that makes it free for the me. Now, we can do things that are temporary. Handicap is the easiest one of those, and a necessity, for instance. But for other, like, quick pickup things, sometimes it's just a matter of a few loading zones. Loading zones can really change how downtown works smartly. You can't make the whole thing loading zone, but when you've got more and more people ordering from Uber Eats, you need to sort of start thinking about that. And that means, less parking spaces. But actually, a loading zone can service like 30 trips every hour, not just one parked car. So there's a lot of those balances we'll be recommending. I think that can make some sense, and they may influence the Main Street design. Ma'am, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm just addressing something that I've been aware of for a while that's happening now, which I hope will change, which is I'll be downtown and I'll see people on the weekends, we have free parking. And also people that come in from out of town, and sometimes like behind the co-op or different places, they'll be putting money in the meters. And, you know, if I'm have the time and I can catch them, I'll say, you know, you don't have to pay today. But it's happened so many times, and there doesn't seem to be anything that's put out to people that are coming here from other places to shop and to spend money, that they don't have to pay on the weekends. And that should be everywhere. And the other thing I've noticed in a lot of parking meters is you can't read them. They're very cloudy. You can't see how much time you have, and sometimes they don't work, and you don't know if your money's been accepted or not. And because I had a ticket one time when I put in like 4 quarters,
Right.
and I thought it was okay, but the meter I couldn't see anything, and the meter wasn't working. So I think that's a whole different issue. But
The equipment is older. It
Yeah.
is something we have to address and at least
Yeah.
suggest solutions for. Just making a better parking meter is easy to do if you have the money. And that's going to be one of the issues here. It's not going to be easy to go out there, make all the parking meters work well, and be clear how they operate. Similarly, it's hard to even put in a lot of signs, though they're a lot cheaper. And that might help the messaging like you're talking about. But I will say, an outsider who's willing to feed a meter when it's free is pure indication that they're ready and used to paying. So just in the right spots, that makes some sense. Right next to you, what was?
I mean, basically, a lot of our parking meters are nothing more than posts we drop money into. We don't know how much time we're getting for it because you can't read the thing. You don't know how much time you've got on your meter because you can't read the thing. So basically, a lot of tickets have been given to people who can't even know what in the world is supposed to be going on with that meter. They're just dropping money into it. They don't know how much time they're getting for that quarter. They don't know anything. They can't even see the time when it comes when it's about to go up. No, because you know, you can't read it. You can't read the numbers. You can't read the
Right.
messages.
The equipment is old, I understand that. It's
I think we
definitely something
bumped
that
out or something.
the city has mentioned. And again, we just need to be careful about how to do that, because there's a lot of expense in replacing that equipment. Many communities will get rid of meters and just put in a pay box here and there, because so many are switching over, as you have, to the pay by cell phone. And so a lot of folks just do it this way, but that's not true for everybody. So you still need to have some way for others to interact with the system. Let me take just like 2 more questions, because then I want you guys up front. We're going to pull the tables up a little bit and pull some chairs in, so it's a little more inviting to do that. You had, yeah, go. Yeah.
Marlboro doesn't has free parking. All we ever hear is how poor this city is, so I get it. So it's bringing in money. But when other major places in the state don't pay, it's free everywhere. I don't know how they're doing it, but I go there on a steady basis, and other towns too. They just don't have a meter.
I think it has to do with what's there. I mean, I'd much rather be in Greenfield than Marlboro, no offense. It's just a nicer downtown. It's more of a regional attraction. People come here.
If the meters don't work and the snow is so deep that I'm gonna kill
I
myself
agree
trying
with.
to feed it,
That I agree with.
don't wanna go there.
I get that. Okay, any other questions before we come up? One more question over here, sir.
With the technology that we have in Greenfield, is something like variable pricing something we can implement?
Not with the technology you have. You can implement variable pricing just by changing the base rate, but it would be like that all the time.
Yeah.
And that's a step. That's a baby step, right? Changing that different days. Obviously, some days it should be cheaper, and other days it could be more expensive. Technology does that. You don't have that.
Yeah.
Not yet.
No, yeah, just clarifying, thank you.
Okay, so I'm pulling these tables up because I want to hear more